Hi, I'm Julie Hasson, founder and chief story collector of the Chalk and Chances Project, and I have the pleasure today of hanging out in the Green Dragon Studios with Dill. Dennis is a 17-year veteran educator who right now is teaching in a combination of two passions, history and this really cool makerspace. So thank you, Dennis, for having us in your space today.
Thank you, Julie, for having me.
So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, but first I'm wondering, how would you describe your teacher persona? That combination of Dennis as a person and Mr. Dill as a teacher.
Honestly, I always try to describe it as widespread chaos, but it's like a controlled chaos. I think most of the people that's ever been around me, they don't know how to handle what they see, because from the outside looking in, it seems like everything is out of control. When administration comes in, the kids are always talking, always doing something, always seems like they're off task until they sit down with them and they're asking them questions about what we're learning, and the next thing you know, it's like they can't figure it out. Oh, they do know what's going on. They are learning. So it's like a widespread chaos. If you're not in here, it's really hard to truly understand. I don't even understand it half the time.
But it works.
It works,
and
for
it
whatever
works
reason.
Really well. So talk about, you give kids this organic opportunity to problem solve and collaborate. What is the ultimate impact you hope you have on their lives?
Ultimate impact, I honestly think that I want them to remember what they did in class, not necessarily what they scored on a test or how great of an essay they wrote, but I'm really focused on building memories. You know, I want them to think back of like, hey, we did this in Dill's class, and even when we are studying items and we're reflecting back on what we learned, if they're going through like an exam, it's like, well, we never learned that. And there's always like some kid, yes, we did. We learned that when we did this.
Okay.
So it's like, okay, we made a video, that's when we did this. Remember when we did the podcast? All right, so it's not necessarily the first thing they remember is not the content, it's the activity. So it's always like trying to build like those memories. And even when I talk to past kids, they can always pick out that one thing that they remember most. If it's, I think from my other schools from way back, they always said it's the trebuchet that we built. It was like the biggest thing, and we were launching pumpkins, and only thing they can remember, but they can remember that item that always sticks out. That's really what I want, is really what can they remember based on memories. Even if it's just me and them talking about something, they always remember something that's not always content related.
But hidden in all of that is all of this learning. Like,
yes.
I think the beauty of what you do is they don't realize how much they're learning in all of those activities.
Absolutely, and that is crazy. Most of them, they can't instantly remember, but the second that we start talking about it, it's like, oh yeah, and then this, and then this, and then this. So it's always like a constant reminder of like they are learning. It's just not always right at the top of their head. It's always kind of linked to, and I always try to remind them that's how we learned, like linking everything in together.
It's how we learn in real life.
It is.
So it must be a challenge for them to have such a contrast between some of their other, especially academic classes, and what they experience with you. So how do you help them navigate that contrast?
It's an interesting contrast because first of all, they have to remember that their other teachers aren't me, and trying to respect like each other's like individual styles that we do this, that just because other teachers aren't doing it like I'm doing it doesn't mean that they're learning any less. Right. And I think that's a key thing, that it's easy to kind of like, this is my personality, this is how I teach, and you can't compare me to another teacher and expect another teacher to do the same thing. They have different tolerance levels, you know, right. Noise levels, the different types of curriculum that they have to follow. You know, because I'm in the Maker Lab and I teach social studies, you know, my other classes, I have a lot more flexibility. I'm not mandated by the same restrictions, the guidelines, the mandated lesson plans that are coming down. I have my standards, my curriculum, but you know, for the most part, if the kids are learning, then everybody's kind of staying away. They've got bigger things to worry about than whether or not social studies is kind of following. You know, as long as the kids are learning, that's the most important thing.
So if we made you, Mr. Dill, king of education, and I would argue that we should.
I don't know if I'd go that far.
And you could change one thing, what would you change?
Change one thing. I think we talk a lot about giving the professional power back to the teachers. And that's honestly what I would love to see, is for politics to stay out of the education classroom, because I think that's really where we are going wrong. We've taken the absolute power away from the teachers. We're trying to correct a system based on the lower 10%, the bad teachers, if you will, that always seem to make the news. But the reality is 95% of us are doing everything that we can do, and are doing a phenomenal job, but we never hear about that. We're always saying, well, we have to do all these mandated tests and activities. We got to do all these things to make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. But we've always done what we've been told to do. We've always had that, and kind of pinning everything onto like some sort of mandated policy that's going to make a difference. Right now, I'm in year 17. It's always been testing. Testing was supposed to be the big answer. And here we are. Math scores are flat. They haven't increased in the last 15, 20 years. So how has all the testing really helped?
Wow. And math scores are flat, and critically, teacher retention is falling, and teachers entering the profession, those numbers are falling.
Yeah.
So clearly we've made some backwards steps in this venture to reform schools. So on that note, part of my purpose is to try to help aspiring teachers understand what it's like in our profession. What advice would you give brand new teachers?
What advice would I give? Not to compare yourself to anybody else. I think that's the biggest issue that we have. Even veteran teachers, sometimes we make things look easier than what they really are. Me being a tech person, for whatever reason, the tech works for me. Right. And I can make it look really, really easy, but that doesn't mean that it is really easy. Comparing to what another teacher's room looks like, versus what you have, their bulletin boards are better. There's a reason why I don't have any really decorated bulletin boards, because I can't do them. We're supposed to every quarter or so, we're supposed to update the bulletin boards.
Right.
I usually spend most of my time hiding the bulletin board, so I don't have to do that. My best bulletin boards I've ever done was always created by a student or my wife. I could never do that. I can do a lot of things. Bulletin board's not one of them. So I think really just not comparing yourself, and focusing on your strengths, on what you do well. There are certain things that I can do well at, and then there are certain things that I don't do well at. Doing a comprehensive lesson plan, I can't do. I'm not an education major, so I never really was shown how to do it. I can do great activities, but I can't do lesson plans. And sometimes I have to overcompensate in other areas, so they look beyond my bad lesson plans that don't make a lot of sense to me.
Right.
But in the whole overall picture, there's things, I think we just need to focus on our strengths and not compare ourselves to each other.
And I think the question always is it working for our kids?
Absolutely.
If it's working for our kids, then it's working. Right? Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that's good advice for teachers and kids. Stop comparing, focus on strengths, and do what you model, which is be really passionate about the work you're doing. And I appreciate the example you set for all of us.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for letting us visit this awesome space. We might take a quick look around Mr. Dill's space, if you don't mind. And as always, we are wishing you an endless supply of chalk and chances.
Mr. Dill was one of the most impactful teachers at McKeel, whether we were sixth graders or whether we were ready to graduate. He was the one person that was consistently there for us. Even if you just needed to go in and rant to somebody, he would always give you his honest opinion and always let you see the light. I had Mr. Dill for the first time when I was in sixth grade, and being new to middle school, you needed someone to rely on, and he was there for you. And I had the pleasure of working with him and getting to know him throughout the next 5, 6, 7 years after that, through history fair and through other classes. And Mr. Dill was just always the teacher that was like our dad. And so the day he left was very hard for absolutely everyone at the school. Even if they didn't have him yet, they knew the legacy he had held throughout his students. And there was this hashtag called Dill taught me, and you had students just on the bus like tweeting so many memories about him, like Dill taught me to be myself, and just Dill taught me to care. And these little phrases that may not mean a lot to people that were outside the school, but meant a lot to those with him. And on that day, he also wrote a blog to these students that he had not had the chance to graduate with, because he felt like he graduated with his classes as well. And to my specific class, he had wrote, to the class of 2016, I'm sorry I will not be able to take you to the rock around the clock finish line, but I am so glad you are here with me today to be a part of this moment. Be the best that you can be and never let anyone tell you to change. Empower yourself through education because it does make a difference. And those words are just something that I feel like everyone in my class held with us till the day we graduated, and those words are just something to always hold on to because it's our last moments of him.
So Mr. Dill was very supportive of people that wanted to work hard. So with History Fair, we were very close, and he worked intimately with all of his students for History Fair. But he would also have older students mentor younger ones so they could kind of snowball their knowledge for other people. So for the school History Fair, I was working as like an assistant, and then I was working as a judge, and then I came back after I graduated and worked as a judge. And then whenever he left McKeel and went to Jewett, I would go back to Jewett, or go to Jewett because I didn't go there. I would go to Jewett and help with paperwork, with projects, with finding resources, with anything that you could really think of. I helped a girl make paper. Like, that was so fun, and just, it was so hands-on and just great. So after I was helping with History Fair, I became a substitute teacher. So he got me some amazing substitute teaching jobs at Jewett for different grade levels, different subjects, so I could kind of feel out where I wanted to go because I wanted to be a teacher. So I would sub for him as well, which nobody loves having a sub, especially if your normal teacher is Dill, because he's amazing, so why would you want a sub? But working for him as a sub, I would try to bring that same attitude of, I'm going to be real with you, but I'm still going to try to help you out, and let's work together to make something. I helped kids with their coding. I helped kids work on History Fair. They didn't have to write the briefs we used to have to write because I could help them with that. But other like history projects, and even whenever I went back to sub, I learned things, which was always really great because, you know, learning is fun. And just every lesson is so unique and different, and he's always using new technology to create and to push his students. Like with Minecraft, he's having them build coliseums and ships. I subbed for him whenever he was doing the Polk State College Kids in College thing, where they were building massive historical creations in Minecraft, and it's just mind-blowing. And they're all working collaboratively, which is difficult when you have enough kids in a room, but they were all working on their own things. They were excited about the project, and just, he feeds that excitement and just always pushes somebody to make something amazing. And I feel that so many of his students have been able to take that push and put it into other things that make you want to be amazing. And just, I can't say enough about how he's influenced my life. He's just the best.